Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the December meeting of the Contra Costa Tail Spinners, now in our 25th year, if I'm correct. And I'm Liz Nichols. I'm one of the co-hosts. And Sally Holtzman, could you wave, Sally, is another. And we're so glad you're all here. And we haven't always done a December meeting when we were in person. We usually didn't. It would fall so close to the holidays. But we decided to try it this year on Zoom, and here we all are. And I've got behind me lights for all the festivals of lights of this time of year, those that are past and those that are in the middle and to come. And we have a wonderful group of storytellers for you tonight. And we will get started. Now, let's see. I don't want to just look at myself. All right. So I'm going to be introducing each of the storytellers. We ask you to mute yourself while a little housekeeping before I introduce the storytellers. To mute yourself and feel free to put comments in the chat in between the stories, please. It can be distracting to storytellers if you do it. And of course, everyone can close their chat if it's distracting to them. But what was I going to say? You can show your appreciation to the storytellers afterwards, like this. And at the end, we will unmute and all applaud all of our wonderful storytellers. If you need to leave in the middle of this, we understand. But let me introduce our first storyteller for this evening is Brother Ben Tucker. He's been here before. He'll be here again, I sure hope. And Ben, tell us a story.
Thank you, Liz. The things that I used to do, I can't do no more. That song reminds me of a basketball game I had with my son, my grandson actually, about 2 or 3 years ago. It was in the midst of COVID, and he was on lockdown like everyone else. Now, my grandson loves basketball. He's a basketball fiend. And he was benched by COVID. And he was very, very upset. And his mom said he was acting out. He was going stir crazy, cabin fever. And he was bouncing his basketball all over the house. And he was breaking furniture, broke a chandelier, and even broke a window. So she called me, "What to do, Daddy, with this boy?" I said, "You know, you got a big backyard. Why don't you build a basketball court in the back?" "Oh, Daddy, we can't afford that." I said, "I'll tell you what, I will lay the cement, have all the masonry done, and you and Rodney," that's my grandson's dad, "pay for a regulation size basketball hoop. I want the one that goes up 10 feet. She says, "I think we could swing that." I say, "Well, get it done. And that way, you get it done, he can go outside. This COVID's going to be with us for a while. And you could even have his personal trainer, Brittany, come to the house and work him out." Sounds like a deal, Daddy. So within a month, the court was built, the hoop was purchased, and the young man was out there playing basketball. He was so pleased. And so a month later, COVID kind of lightened up, and I said, "I'm going to come up and check out the court, and I want to see what you got, Al." That's my grandson's name. "And we'll play a little one-on-one." He said, "Good, Grandpa. Come on He has that choir boy voice. And so I drove up to Elk Grove, which is where they live, and went in the backyard, beautiful court, half court, had the hoop up there. So his mom went in and was cooking sandwiches, making sandwiches for us. And we went out in the backyard and we went at it. So I had him do a few little drills. I sent him out to the 3-point line. I said, boom, here's the ball. Show me what you can get at the top of the key. As the top of the key is just before the free throw line. And he hit 3 points. Boom, went around to the left, went around to the right. He was good. And I said, okay, why don't we do a game of one-on-one? I put on my basketball shoes. He put on his basketball shoes. And we're going to play the 21. And I started off easy with him. I let him do a few little layups, get his confidence up. And then he went for a drive up to the net. Bam! I slapped the ball down. I could see right away his face change. He didn't like it. And he got serious. And so he started dribbling and he started showing me his skill with the basketball. He would dribble to the left, he would dribble to the right, and then he would fake like he was going in, then he would back up. He was getting me confused. But then I remembered I had played basketball in high school, and my coach taught me that when you are guarding a point guard, which is what he was, don't follow the ball. Follow the player's hips. Watch his hips. The hips don't lie, he always told us. And that's what I did. I focused on his hips. His hips would move to the left, move to the right. Didn't care anything about the ball. And after a while, he started going to the left, going to the right, going to the left. I slapped at the ball, I missed it. Going to the right, I slapped at it again, I missed it. And then he did something I had never seen. He bounced the ball between his legs and it came out on the left side. And I went for it, but he moved to the right. And I tried to shift my movement. And when I did that, I crashed to the ground, fell squarely on the knee that I had replaced 2 years ago, my titanium knee. And I fell to the ground in excruciating pain. I broke out in a sweat. I started seeing stars. It felt like someone had stabbed a hot poker in my knee. And I blurted out an expletive, fuck! And as I was writhing on the ground, I saw my grandson hover over me and he was crying. Grandpa, Grandpa, are you okay? Are you okay, Grandpa? I'm sorry, Grandpa, are you okay? And I came out of it, and my concern about him overshadowed the pain that was throbbing in my knee. And I said, I'm okay, Al. I'm okay, unconvincingly. I said, go in the house and don't tell your mother anything. Just say you need some ice in a bag and come right out. And so he went in, he came out, gave me the baggie. I said, help me into the chair. He helped me into the chair. I said, bring the other chair over here. Let me prop my knee up and put this ice on the knee. Did all of that, but he continued to cry and apologize. Once I got the ice on my knee, the pain started to calm down. And my concern was for him. I'm sorry, Grandpa, I didn't mean to hurt you. And then I came to my senses. I said, son, you didn't hurt me. I had an accident. This is all part of the game of basketball. You get injured. It's all part of the game. You didn't hurt me. You understand? Yeah, but I'm sorry. I say, you don't have to apologize. This is basketball. You need to learn that. You're going to get hurt. Other people will get hurt because of move you've made on the court, but it's unintentional. It's part of the game. And then he started to get it. And then I said, as a matter of fact, I need to apologize to you. Why? Why do you need to apologize to me, Grandpa? You didn't do anything to me. I said, I need to apologize for my potty mouth. I said a bad word. I'm sorry, Al, but I was in pain and people use bad words when they're hurting. I said, you forgive me for speaking like that? He said, yeah, I do, Grandpa. And I said another thing, don't mention this to your mother, just between the two of us guys, okay? Okay, I won't do that, Grandpa. And then I leaned back and I said, hey, man, where did you learn that move? He said, oh, I learned that, Grandpa, on YouTube. It's called breaking ankles. I said, breaking ankles? Yeah, when I did the crossover like Steph Curry, that throws you off balance, and that's why you fell. I broke your ankles, Grandpa. I looked back at him and I said, yeah, boy, you broke my ankles and you almost broke my knee. And about that time, my daughter came out and said, hey, why you need that ice? I said, I just kind of fell a little bit on the court while I was playing, Al. And she said, Daddy, you know you too old to be playing basketball with Al. I looked at her and I say, now I know it. The things that I used to do, I can't do no more. Guitar Slim.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Ben. Ben is one of the many folks here today and in our swap who I first met through Stage Bridge. And Ben, I heard you tell that story a week or so ago at Stage Bridge, and it was so great to hear you tell it again. And these chances to tell, that's what our swap is about. Like, take a story either that could be brand new, could be you've told it before once, could be you've told it many times. They're all so welcome here. And I love how you sing, you use the music to enhance. It's just great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And our next storyteller, I also met through Stage Bridge, and that is Jean Pimentel. And Jean has a different kind of story to tell us, a folk tale today, and I can't wait to hear it. Please tell us a story, Jean.
Okay. I'm going to tell a story of folktale, which I discovered quite recently. It's from Ethiopia, and if I have time afterwards, I'll tell you about how I found it, because it's kind of interesting. This is a folktale from the highlands of Ethiopia. Once upon a time, a long time ago, in a village in the highlands of Ethiopia, the sun was shining on the thatched roofs of the huts there, and a woman came out of her house to give a bone, a little bone, to her son's little dog. But before the little dog could eat it, another bigger dog came along and snatched it out of his jaws. And the little dog started snarling and snarling. And a wise old man who lived in the village heard this snarling, and he came to see what was happening. And when he saw it, he said, oh, someone had better stop this. If this fight goes on, the boys will start fighting. No one listened to him. Well, the children were coming home from school. And yes, the owner of the little dog saw what was happening, and he got a stick and he tried to fight off this bigger dog. And then the boy who owned the bigger dog came along and said, what? Stop hitting my dog. And in a minute, he said, they started fighting each other. And the man said, "Oh dear, this is bad. Someone had better stop these boys fighting, because if the boys are fighting, pretty soon the mothers will be fighting." And he was right. When the mothers heard what was going on, they started shouting at each other, and they're getting angrier and angrier. And the old man said, "Will someone please try to stop this? Because if the mothers are fighting, pretty soon the men will be fighting." And he was right. About that time, the men started coming home from the day's labor, and the husband of one of the women came and dropped with bringing his plow back home. And when he saw the women, he saw one the first woman hitting at the other woman with her big cooking spoon, and he got in and tried to separate them. And then along came the second woman's husband, and he saw what was happening, and he let go his cow, and he came and he saw that this other man had his hands on his wife, and he started fighting him. Oh my, that was really bad. The old man said, "This is going to get worse. These two men are from different clans in our tribe. And if the clans start fighting," and that is what happened. More and more men came up to back up the person from their clan. And they battled and battled, and it became a full war. There were lots of men all fighting each other. And by sundown, 16 men were dead. 8 from one clan and 8 from another clan. And the old man said, "This will never, this will never stop unless we do something." Well, the man, when dusk fell, they all realized what was happening, that they had started a full-scale war, and it was just going on, and they didn't know how to stop it. But the old man said, "My advice is to go ask your elders, the elders of the tribe, to advise you according to the law." So yes, that seemed reasonable, and the men from both clans went to ask the elders what to do. And the elders consulted for a long time. And then they came back and said gravely, "According to the law, every man who killed another man must give the family of that man 100 cows." And the men looked at each other and said, "We can't do that. If I give 100 cows to another family, my family will starve. This is not good." But they didn't know what else to do. And then the old man said, "No, that's not going to work. Now, I have another idea. What started this war was your pride and your anger. And you've got to get rid of your pride and your anger before this war will ever stop." And they looked at him and said, "Well, pride and anger, we couldn't get rid of those. Those are things that you can't see." The old man said, "Well, if you can't understand things you can't see, you must find something to represent those things. Now, I know each clan has a ceremonial silver necklace, and that's the symbol of your pride. And if anyone insults that, then you get very angry. So the pride and the anger get together. You should get rid of those silver necklaces as symbols of your pride and your anger. Take them down to the river, throw them in the deepest part of the river where you will never be able to retrieve them." And the men looked at each other. They were horrified, but they couldn't think of anything better. And the more they thought about it, they began to understand. And so they took their ceremonial silver necklaces. They went to the deepest part of the river, and at the same time, they threw them in and sat back and reflected. And after that, they found that they could forgive each other and come to terms and live in peace. And they stopped the war. And so after that, they never fought again. Now, what happened to the two dogs? Oh, they were fine because each one was given a bone the right size for him, and they didn't have to fight either. So their fight was over. That's my story.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Can people
Yeah.
hear me? Okay. Thank you, Jean. I've never heard that story before, but I've heard similar ones from other cultures. So I think we all over the world need to hear stories like that.
Well, that's what I felt. And I just wanted, do I have a minute?
You have a minute, so please tell
Okay.
us where
I
you.
just wanted to show you where I got this from. Was this book? Oh, of course, it shows it mirror image, doesn't it?
No,
Wait.
I see it.
Oh,
Okay.
you see it? Okay. It's Folk Tales for a Better World. And it's a collection of folk tales from all over the world by this wonderful woman, Elizabeth Laird, whom I discovered during the last year. The way I discovered her was I was in New Zealand visiting my relatives, and my niece there works in a thrift shop. And I was waiting for her and looking around, and there were some books there. And I didn't want to take home heavy books, but I found this little tiny book called A Little Piece of Ground by Elizabeth Laird. And it is the story of a young boy in Palestine. And it's a very personal story telling how persecuted they were, the Palestinians then. Everything was getting bombed and destroyed, and all he and his friends wanted was a soccer pitch, somewhere to play soccer. It's an absolutely delightful story, and it really just gives you the feeling of what it's like to be in a land where war is going on. So I was so impressed that I looked her up and I found another. Well, she has written many books, but I chose one which I was able to get on my favorite book place, Abe Books, and it's called House Without Walls. And this is about a girl who was in Syria during the civil war there, and there was a years and years long civil war, and she was completely displaced. All her hopes and dreams were gone. She was living in a tent instead of the lovely house she had been living in. And it gives her point of view, and the point of view, all the things that they had to contend with. And I would just like to really share this author with you because I think she's so wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And maybe you could even put her name in the chat if you use
I
chat.
could do that,
Please
yeah.
do that. So that
Yeah,
will help
definitely.
us
Yeah.
follow up because we all need those stories right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Now our next storyteller is Jean Ellison, and Jean is someone I have known for such a long time. I think first through the Bay Area Storytelling Festival. Jean, both of us had done worked on that for many years. And we love it when you come to our swap. And all the way from Berkeley, Jean Ellison, please tell us a story.
Thank you. All the way from Berkeley. I'm trying to hide my self view so I don't have to watch myself. Okay. It's not going away. I'll try to ignore me. That's hard to do. I've been feeling nostalgic during the holidays and remembering Christmases past. And a very memorable Christmas for me was when I was 8. And I learned an important lesson that good things can come in small packages. I always thought the bigger the package, the better the gift. But in this small package, I waited till the very last to open. And when I did, I was so surprised. There was Cinderella watch in a glass slipper. My first watch. I was in heaven. I couldn't believe my good luck. I wore Cinderella inside. I wore Cinderella watch outside. I wore Cinderella watch when I was riding my horse. I even went swimming with Cinderella watch one time. She drowned. And I couldn't revive her. I tried everything. Now, you see, my grandfather, he had a watchmaker's bench, and he must have been a hobby watchmaker. Aha. Maybe I could fix Cinderella. So I opened up the back of the watch, and to my surprise, there were so many little pieces. I took one and looked at it, and oh, I'll put it right there so I'll remember where I put it. And I'll take another and I'll put it over here. So 1, 2, okay. Well, there were like hundreds of little pieces. And it got to be obvious that Cinderella was not going to be put back together again like Humpty Dumpty. I was crestfallen. I'd killed Cinderella. I put her in my jewelry box, and she stayed there quietly and calmly for many years. Time passed, and my next best gift was when I was in high school. It was also in a rather small box, a little bit bigger than Cinderella. And when I opened it, oh my, it was Mickey Mouse. He had those little mitts that would tell the time. It was a wind-up watch like Cinderella. There was no batteries then. I wore Mickey Mouse everywhere. Time passed. Mickey got older, but he still worked. I remembered to wind him. I remembered not to take him swimming. But one day, Mickey stopped working. No amount of winding or unwinding could bring Mickey back to life. Mickey went into my jewelry box with Cindy. Now, quite a bit of time passed. I was married. I was divorced. I had a boyfriend who was going to Northern Ireland on a Fulbright scholarship, and I was invited to go with him. And I thought, well, there's a war going on there. I need something, a good luck charm. I'll bring Mickey back to life. He'll be my good luck charm. Capwell's, a department store. Remember those department stores? Yeah, right. Capwell's had a watch repair place. So I took Mickey in there and I said, please, you've got to fix this. I'm leaving for Northern Ireland and I have to have him. He's my good luck charm and I can't go without him. And the watchmaker looked at me like, yeah, right. Okay, I'll do what I can. So he said, I'll call you when Mickey's back to life. And I got a call. I went rushing down to Capwell's. I picked up Mickey, and sure enough, Mickey was alive and well. I wound him up, and his little hands were going. I was ecstatic. I packed what I could for this year-long trip I was taking with my boyfriend, now my husband of over 40 years. That's another story. And met our exchange counterparts, the people that were going to live in our house, we were going to live in their house. We met them in Washington, D.C. and had just a little quick exchange and get to know them a little bit. And we got on a plane. It was like a sardine can. It was not a fancy plane. It was one that only had 2 rows of seats, and they were like this. It's a long way to Northern Ireland. Well, we had to stop for petrol in Dublin. What? Can't you let us out here? No. Proceeding to London. We got to London and on another plane to Belfast. And when we landed the plane, I swear, when that plane landed in Aldergrove Airport in Belfast, Mickey died. My talisman, my good luck charm. It really bothered me. It really worried me. We got to our place in Northern Ireland, and the first night we were there was bombs going off downtown, and our exchange counterparts, brothers and sisters, came to welcome us, and they'd made an Irish stew for us, but we were so late because there was a delay and blah, blah, blah. And the bombs are going off down in the city, and our exchange counterparts brother said, "Oh, don't worry about that. That's just a wee welcome committee. We arranged to have that little show of excitement that you're here." Ugh. I wore Mickey, even though it didn't work, because he was going to be my good luck charm. And it was the Christmas of that year, just before we actually got married in Northern Ireland, but that's another story. My husband gets me a watch for Christmas that year. It was from Russia. It was a teeny tiny little watch face, just a little teeny tiny watch face that you could hardly see. My eyes were better then, but I could hardly see it. And I was pleased at the thought. He said, "Well, you'll never get a watch like this in America." And I thought, "Oh, okay." Well, I wore that watch, and I kept Mickey with me at all times because, I mean, what's not to love about a dead Mickey Mouse? We spent our year, we lived through the experience, we talk about it as though it was happened yesterday. But that is my story of good things come in small packages. And I'm sticking to it. Oh, my husband's over there going, thank you.
Thank you, Jean. That was wonderful. You know, I just want to say, like, when you were looking in those boxes, I could see, and I think we all could, people are nodding their heads, like you really brought us into your memories in such a beautiful and vivid way. And also, I know how important luck is to you because I've heard you tell many stories about luck, right? And whole programs about luck. And so this just added, to my understanding of like where that comes from,
Yeah.
and the connection between the personal stories and then the traditional stories that are about things like luck. And I really appreciate that that,
Thank you.
you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah, thank
Awesome.
you very much.
Thank you. All right. Our next storyteller is Ama Danasanti, and she is new to all of you here, I think, except for Annie, my friend Annie, who's here. And we all know each other, Annie and Ama and I, through the world of laughter yoga, which is another passion of mine, some of you know. And just so thrilled to have, it's so wonderful when new people come and are gonna go and just tell us a story. So Ama has a story that she's been working on, and she's I'm just gonna say beforehand, she'll love your feedback. She's gonna put that in the chat too, but uh welcome, Ama. So glad that you could make it.
Thank
Please
you. Thank you, Liz. Thank you for being so welcoming. It's 1979. I'm 17 years old, and I'm sitting in a class on religions of India at the University of California at Santa Cruz. Jack Engler is teaching, and he's been telling us stories of a great meditation master whose name is Deepama. As I listen, I light up. The story he's telling are so moving. Part of it is about how much suffering she experienced, but also part of the story is what she was able to do with meditation, how she was able to overcome her suffering. Later in the class, Jack was talking about a discussion that he had had with Deepama's teacher. And he was talking about the traditional Buddhist view that only men could become Buddhas. Deepama was leaning against the wall in the back of the room. And Jack said that it looked like she was dozing. And then all of a sudden, she sat bolt upright and she said, "I can do anything that a man can do." When Jack was telling this story, everyone in the class started laughing. And I decided I wanted to meet Deepama. I wanted meditation to be the center part of my life. So I asked Jack if he would start teaching us. And then I started going on retreats. And I learned how to watch my emotions and my thoughts and not be so reactive to them. Fast forward 9 years, and I'm in Calcutta, India. And I walk into the Mahabodhi Society, and there's this large room where there's monks that are chanting on a platform. And a few feet in front of me, sitting on a small cushion, was a woman who was very small framed, and she was wearing a white sari. So I couldn't see her face. All I could see was this whiteness engulfing this small being sitting in front of me. But there was this huge force that was coming out of her that it was like I had to brace myself. And I thought to myself, who on earth is that? Well, that was Deepama, the great meditation master that I'd heard about. So me and some friends that I met staying at the Mahabodhi Society, we would walk across the streets of Calcutta and up the tiny little stairs of her apartment into her room, which was a small, small little apartment. And we would just listen to her, or we would sit in silence. And then when we would leave, she would put her tiny hands on our faces. She'd blow on our heads, and it felt like we were in a waterfall of love. And that waterfall, that love, changed me. I felt love in a way that I'd never experienced before. I remember while I was in Calcutta writing my family and saying that if my life ended at that point, it would have been enough to meet somebody like Deepama and feel that kind of loving presence. I was so clear. I wanted my life to be dedicated to meditation. So after meeting Deepama, eventually I made my way to Dharamsala, which is in northern India. I was hiking in the mountains with a friend, a newfound friend, whose name was Brian. We were at about 10,000 feet, and we were on a steep slope off of the regular trail. And Brian scampered up a rock, and he asked me if I could climb it. So he was sitting on top of the rock, and I was at the base of the rock. And I answered him, before I answered him about his question, I said, "Did you notice that there was a cave here?" And right out of that rock came the most remarkable noise I have ever in my life heard. It was a combination of a roar, a growl, and a snort. And then running towards me was a huge Himalayan black bear. And when his face was about an arm's distance from my face, many things happened very quickly. I screamed, I jumped, I screamed again, and I passed out from fear. And somehow, when I had jumped back, I'd gotten myself tangled around a horizontal branch. So I was face planted onto this branch, straddling it with my arms and legs on both sides. And the bear was straddling me. So his belly was pressed against the entire length of my back, and my head was in his mouth. He was chewing on the back of my head. And when I came to, the very first moment of consciousness was a boundless fear. It had no edges to it. It had no gaps to it. It was infinite. And yet there was the knowing of fear There was the fear and the awareness of the fear. And then there was the thought, there's no point in being afraid because you're going to die. Something in me knew I was not going to be able to negotiate myself out of this one. And then there was the knowing of the thought. The awareness wasn't colored by what it knew. And at that moment, I let go. I surrendered, and I was filled with light. I was luminous. I had no fear. I was just curious what it was going to be like to watch myself die. And then, out of nowhere, the sound of Om came. And the sound filled me up. It wasn't something I said, it was an internal sound. And all I did was turn my attention to focus on the sound. And the precise, exact moment of turning attention to the sound of Om, the bear catapulted over me, slid on its belly for 15 to 30 feet and ran away. And Brian came down the rock and was by my side in an instant. And he said, "You're not that badly hurt." And what a relief just after being eaten by a bear to hear those words. But the truth is that I had 8 gashes on my neck and on the back of my head and on my forehead. And one of them was about 1.5 inches deep at the base of my skull, but he hadn't penetrated my skull. So it was a project to get back up where we had left our backpacks and to make our way down to the first place and to get ourselves to the medical place where I was stitched up and given a whole bunch of immunizations. And I remember there in the hospital on the cot, crying, thinking there had to be a reason why I was still alive. And yet I didn't understand. I didn't know why. All I knew, or all that I eventually came to know, was that meditation was the reason I was able to stay present. And meditation made it possible for me to rest my attention in awareness rather than absorb into the fear. So the next year, I went to England and ordained into a contemplative Buddhist tradition so that I could dedicate my life to meditation and to teaching meditation to others. And so I lived a life of an incredible immersion in meditation. We had so many opportunities for retreats and hours a day of meditation and retreats every year. And yet after 20 years of meditation, 10 years living as a nun, I discovered that some of my core beliefs hadn't changed. It was shocking for me to discover that I still wasn't free from anxiety, and I still felt unworthy of living a life of peace. And even having gone through such a powerful experience with meditation, in the face of fear, there were still some basic fears that hadn't shifted. So looking for ways that could help me make sense out of why these fears still lingered, I learned many different things. And one of the things that I discovered or learned about was attachment theory. And attachment theory helped me understand how not having safety and someone to help me make sense out of what I was feeling as a child was underneath my core fears as an adult. So I reached out to Dr. Elliott, who is a founder of an attachment repair program, and I asked if he would be willing to work with me personally and then supervise me to bring this program to help meditators. And so I feel really excited. This January, We're launching an integrated meditation program. And the premise of the program is that it will help transform patterns that meditation hasn't shifted. It will make available the benefits that meditation is designed for. It will support having healthier relationships and experience the benefits when your natural baseline of stress reduces. What I have learned is that our potential for a joy-filled life of excellence is worth whatever it takes. And now I feel it is an honor that I can take all I have lived through, the teachings of Jack and the inspiration of Deepama, and make it available to help others. Thank you. So what I would like to say, and I'm going to put my email address in the chat, is that tanasanti@awakeningtruth.org, which are both impossible. If you have feedback for this talk or how I could make it better, or questions about it, or questions about the program, I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Amma, and we loved hearing from you. That was, what an experience. Wow. All right. Well, I think we have heard already such rich and different and meaningful stories. Let's just take a moment to take a breath or two. And perhaps I will invite you to, as we take a breath or two, to actually add a laugh, to get ready to hear more stories, to make more space in ourselves. So I invite you to take a breath, and if it feels good, lift your arms up as you breathe in and then breathe out. And let's do it again. This time, smile. And then if you want to do it this time, I know we won't hear each other because everybody else is muted, but if you want to make a little fake giggle, just laugh for no reason, just make a ha 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 sound as you breathe out. See what happens. Breathe in. Hold it for a minute and so beautiful to connect through stories, connect through laughter, connect through really listening and hearing, appreciating each other. All right. And we have so much more to appreciate. Our next storyteller is Cynthia Cutterback. Hi, Cynthia.
Hey, Liz,
So
long
good
time
to
no
see
see.
you. So good to see you. Someone who's been in and out of our swap but not here for a little while. And I know you've had a lot going on in life and some tough times. And anyway, you look great. And I'm so glad to see you tonight. Please tell us a story.
Sure. There is a particular Christmas card, which, if you haven't seen it, you can imagine it. It is a small village, half timbered, thatched, with mountains looming behind in the twilight and a starry sky emerging. Above the village, is a small church, and colored light spills through the windows of the church to pool in rainbow puddles in the snow. And if you listen very carefully, you can hear them singing Silent Night to the accompaniment of a guitar. No organ, the organ is broken. And this is the village for which Silent Night was written. As you descend from the church in your sight, imagine the graveyard. Every grave has a small Christmas tree on it, lighted. And in the village below, every window has a candle lighted to guide the Holy Family to safety. Now, the winter of my 14th year, my family and I decided to go to Austria, where this village is, and experience the whole German Christmas scene. Oh, we had a wonderful time. We actually did go to the village where Silent Night was written. And on Christmas Eve, we found ourselves in the famous town square of Innsbruck, singing Silent Night in English while everybody around us sang it in German. The story I want to tell you tonight takes place a few days before Christmas. My family and I are in Garmisch in Germany, just below the Zugspitze, which is the tallest mountain in Germany. And my parents are going to go skiing, downhill skiing. I have skis with me, but only cross country. I do not ski downhill, and there's really no cross country on the Zugspitze, so we come up with an alternate plan. At the age of 14, I am going to go alone to Hohenschwangau and visit the famous castle of Neuschwanstein. Oh, you've seen it. You've seen it in the logo of the Disney and the Sleeping Beauty castle. You've seen the travel posters, but you haven't seen it from below in winter. Now, I was taking German at the time. I could say, wo ist der Bahnhof? But that wasn't going to help because the train didn't go anywhere near Hohenschwangau. So instead, my parents put me on a bus in the early hours of the morning, and we meandered across southern Germany with little German housewives getting on and off to do their errands. It all felt very real. And we passed through Schwangau into Hohenschwangau. They love this kind of pair naming of their towns. And I was deposited in a rather empty town square. The only person there was a vendor of small wooden Christmas trinkets. And I went to him and I said, Neuschwanstein, bitte? And he pointed at this road that left the square, and it was dark, and the only sign said 40 kilometers. It didn't even say to what, but I was apparently supposed to walk up this hill, and well, my bus home doesn't come till 1, so off I went up this hill in the snow with the fog and the dark trees looming over me. Within steps, I'd rounded a corner and could no longer see the town. I was completely alone, except, you know that feeling when something's looking at you? I turned, and there above me was a hill, and on the hill was a wall, and the top of the wall, carved in stone, was the biggest, meanest knight I had ever seen. And the knight looked down at me and he said, "Go home, kid." I would if I could, but I can't. The bus isn't until 1. I have to keep going up the silent and snowy hill with occasional glances up at that wall. I came to a gatehouse, which was empty. I came to a cafe, which was empty. I went to the windows to peer in, and nothing. When I turned back towards the castle, I noticed that mine were the only footprints in the snow. That's when I heard, "Holy Mother of God, King Ludwig was nuts. I think that might be him. But if it whistles, it should speak." Okay. I climbed a little hill, went around the edge of this still terrifying castle, and there, above me, in a window where the sun actually was shining, was a little round man in lederhosen leaning out, and he said, "Hello, excuse me. Is there a guided tour with a human tour guide, please?" And he pointed. And I stumbled back around the edge of the castle and into a gift shop, which was open. I got a ticket for the very first tour of the day. The tour guide spoke English. She explained to us about the grotto at the top of the hill, all the stalactites and stalagmites and a great crystal throne. She showed us the room painted with nymphs and dryads, with the secret passage that led to Ludwig's mistress's room. She showed us the great dining table that would lower through the floor with a great clank, 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 to be filled with food by invisible servants because Ludwig preferred his privacy and the table would rise. All told, it was great. And when I came out, the guest house was open. The guard shack had people in it. There was a carriage, a horse-drawn wagon coming up the road with sleigh bells and lights and people singing Christmas carols. I should have come a bit later, but I'm actually kind of proud of what I did. Now, might be only 14. I don't speak much German, but I do know a little bit about travel. So I returned down into Hohenschwangau and I popped into the hotel, another gift shop, lots of gift shops in that neighborhood. And I said, hello, the bus to Garmisch that leaves at 1, where do I catch it? She said, 1 o'clock? No, no, no. The 1 o'clock bus, it doesn't go to Garmisch. It only goes from Hohenschwangau to Schwangau, 3 kilometers down the road. If you want to go back to Garmisch, you have to wait till 5 o'clock. Oh my God. She said, wait, 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 don't panic. I have an idea. There is an American Army tour bus here from the Army base in Garmisch. If you ask them, they might let you ride with them. Now, the tour guide was initially reluctant, but when she found out it would be several hours, she allowed me to ride back. All these big Army guys and their families, and they had to have a guided tour with an English-speaking tour guide. So we made it back. Oh, my parents had called the police in Hohenschwangau. They'd called the police in Schwangau. They'd called the police in 7 towns in between and in Garmisch as well. We called them all off. It was safe. Now, I have traveled alone a lot since then. My German has gotten better, traveled all over Europe. But there's one part of this story that always stays with me. It's been a long day, and the sun was setting when they dropped me off in Garmisch, twilight coming on, lights. And as I walked through a light snow towards our pension, I saw that in every window of every room, there was a candle to guide me to safety.
Thank you, Cynthia. Wow, that story had literally many ups and downs, and you were so expressive. Yeah, travel, and foreign languages, very, very educational. Yeah, and the image of the candles, I love it. You know, in every window. All right. Our next storyteller is Jane Cole, just a regular at our swap. Jane, it's always wonderful to hear a new story from you and tell us a story.
Well, it was Christmas morning, and I had my head under the covers, and it isn't what you think. I was crying. I was trying to be quiet. I was holding in the suffs as well as I could. I dragged and dreaded getting up out of bed. Soon enough, I heard my sister, and she was crying too. Eventually, we had to get up, and it was readily apparent that my mom had been crying too. We were almost 2,000 miles away from home, and this was the first Christmas without our dad. He had died about a month before. We gathered ourselves up, and out we went into a tropical morning, bright, green, beautiful. We arranged for something to eat and eventually wandered out the front of the hotel and onto the beach. We wandered along the beach, and soon enough, the sun, the sea, the birds began to take our interest away from ourselves and into the bigger world. We were in Puerto Vallarta in Mexico. As the day progressed, Karen and I went swimming and enjoyed the warm water, unlike California, and playing in the waves. And my mom enjoyed watching us. I was 24 and my sister was 22. My mom was 57. While Karen and I were swimming, we saw some little boys running down the beach, capering and jumping and cavorting and laughing and then shouting at us. They were saying, "Chows, chows, chows." And Karen and I looked at each other and thought, what are they doing? What is this about? We couldn't figure it out. Finally, it occurred to me, they were saying Jaws and trying to scare us because that movie had just come out. That day, we also saw people parasailing with drawn on ropes behind outboard motorboats. And we had never seen that before. And we were quite taken with that idea. We arranged to do that the next day. And my mom was certain that more disaster would come and was terrified the whole time. But Karen and I both thrilled with that sensation of lifting off and being high in the sky. The fellows who set us up were very patient and exacting, and we felt very safe and competent. And we were really sorry when each of our turns was over and we alighted gracefully on the sand. The days went by. We went into the town of Puerto Vallarta, walked along the Malecón and in the Plaza de Armas and the beautiful little old bandstand, and up the street to the Church of the Virgin of Guadalupe. We wandered around. There was a whole city of life and light. So many lives, so different from ours, and yet similar. And none of them knew about our grief. And we didn't know about any of theirs. Gradually, we were repairing. Gradually, we were pulling back our sense of joy, our sense of strength and health. We heard about a trip you could take on John Wayne's old yacht. They would take you down south, down the coast, and we decided that was something we'd like to try. So Karen and my mom and I boarded the yacht, and there was food and there was beverages and there was music and handsome young Mexican men who asked us to dance, which is not so easy on a moving yacht, but fun nonetheless. The ship took us by these giant rocks with big arches, Los Arcos, and further south and into a little bay. And in the pocket of that bay, dolphins were in the wake of our ship as we entered, and we could lean over and see them so close, and they were so playful. Finally, the ship came in. There was no pier, so little boats were coming out to pick up the passengers. My sister got it in her head that she wanted to swim to shore. And so, of course, I needed to do that with her. So, thoughtless girls that we were, we handed all of our gear to our mother, and we had our swimsuits on underneath our clothes. So we handed our clothes to our mother and dove in and swam to the beach. In a few minutes, our mom greeted us with all of the stuff. We pulled it out of the little boat she was in and helped her out. And this was a little beach community called Yelapa. Now, Yelapa was just a crescent-shaped beach, the point of rock on each end, and the mountains go up right behind it, very, very sharp, steep, verdant tropical mountain. We adored Yelapa from the second we saw it. It was perfect. We hiked up a trail that followed the little stream up to the cascade and enjoyed our hike so much, so beautiful. Back down, we wandered along the beach. We came to a little shop, and my mother bought me this dress. Eventually, it was time for our boat to return, and we boarded and enjoyed our voyage back to Puerto Vallarta. Eventually, we had to return home. We had left behind a lot of grief, a lot of sadness, and a lot of upcoming change. My sister had to return to Portland to finish her college. My mom and I returned to our teaching jobs. We all had a lot to bear and a lot to experience with the loss of our father. My mother did something we're forever grateful. When she was struggling, being a younger woman, widowed, and facing all the chores of taking on a household she had shared with my dad, she found herself at times distraught. But she found a way to calm herself and help herself, especially at night when sleep wouldn't come. She started the day on the pier in Puerto Vallarta, and she relived every moment of the voyage to Yelapa and every step of our day and our voyage home. And she always ended with this: Yelapa, Yelapa, Yelapa. Yelapa, Yelapa, Yelapa. Yelapa, Yelapa, Yelapa.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you for sharing such precious and emotional memories. It was beautiful. Yelapa, Yelapa, Yelapa. Ah. What a rich evening, and about to get richer because we have Vicky Ness with us. We never know what you're going to bring, Vicky. It's always something unique. Please welcome from up in Sonoma and the Do Tell Swap, one of the mainstays of the Do Tell Swap up there. But we love when you come and visit us. And you don't just visit us, you're part of us. Thank you, Vicky, for this story.
Thank you. A huge, thick forest climbed up a steep hill to a ragged ridge line, treetops reaching for the clouds. And that huge, powerful, dark forest was neatly hemmed in at the bottom of the valley by beautifully cultivated cornfields that rose up over undulating hills and finally to a ridgeline on the other side. Now, in the valley, right between forest and field, a housing developer came up with an idea, and he stuck an exploratory finger in between the forest and the field and paved it as a cul-de-sac and put half a dozen vintage Cape Cod houses and called the whole affair Country View Estates. Yes. And people moved in and they were thrilled because you see, they could see right outside their windows all the majesty and power and beauty of nature and the enormous, majestic roll of seasons right outside their windows rolling by. Oh, in spring, why the corn would be new, bright green between rain-soaked dark soil, the whole effect looking like folds of corduroy rising up to the hills. And in summer, the forest would exude a cool, fragrant breath, filled with the scent of honeysuckle from vines that grew up the trees, reaching for the light. And the kids on their summer vacation, oh, they'd come back with such treasures. A little butterfly wing found trembling in a spider web, or a box turtle shell, long ago abandoned with bone white inside, but on the other side, the puzzle piece of black and orange shapes, still distinct, but a treasure. And forest, oh, at night, out of the forest would come fireflies, those incandescent spirits of night, zipping and dipping and twirling. You could get a jar of them and hold the magic in your hands. Now, the next day, of course, it would just be a jar of basically dead flies, but at night it was a mystery. And in fall, oh, it was such a pleasure to watch the farmers and their workers gathering in all the corn and leaving behind the bare bones of corn stalks drying in the warm autumn sun. And the green fat leaves of fall would start to wither and shriek with bright colors of crimson and orange and yellow, and they'd rattle and fight and fly off into the winter winds like flocks of birds. And then winter would come and lay a heavy hand on the forest and cover every winter bare branch with snow and ice, and the whole affair looked like a fairy tale. Oh, it was magnificent. Even the deer and the birds, all fluffed out against the frigid temperature, looked like little plush animals. It was magical. They loved living with a country view. But of course, there was one day that something went a little mashugana, as things happen in paradise. It was the day after Halloween, and it was the day before All Souls Day. It was right at dusk. You see, dusk came early in that little valley because the sun set over that ragged ridge line, casting the valley into a gritty, gray gloaming where dampness and coolness would seep up and the bright reds would turn to smudged rust, and the cobalt blues would fade into ashen lavenders. That gloaming that was such a chill on people's spirits that they'd close their curtains early at times like that. And it was just this particular sunset when house after house was visited by a very odd noise against their windows, a sort of a dum 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 tick tick tock dum tick dum dum. And if they opened their curtains, the light behind them illuminated what looked like white Japanese lanterns bouncing against each other nonsensically like balloons, spinning on unseen axes. And each of them had at least one, maybe two, sometimes three ridiculous looking puppy dog faces on them with little pink noses and flip-floppy ears and huge moronic, slightly menacing eyes that looked in the windows at them. Dum, 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 spinning, dum, dum. Well, the more timid of the people would just close their curtains and pretend like they hadn't seen anything. But the braver of them flicked on their porch lights and opened the door. Hello? Hello? Oh, but there was nobody there. House after house was visited by the plague of puppy dog faces. Well, of course, the neighbors texted each other. So by the time the puppy dog faces got down to the very last house in the cul-de-sac, that was the Sampsons, Mr. Sampson, who was ex-military, was ready for them. No more shenanigans. So when Mrs. Sampson, sitting in the sofa, heard behind her, behind the curtains, that telltale dum 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 tick tick dum tick, she didn't get up and open the curtains. She just looked for her husband and gave him a nod. And he barreled out the door like an enraged bull with a flashlight in one hand and a baseball bat in the other. I have you now. And he looked at them and found them and cornered them. And they were teenagers. The boys were guffawing and pushing each other and laughing. And the girls were snorting and giggling. And the whole raggedy mess of them ran off down the street into the darkness and were gone. I know who you are, Mr. Sampson said. I know your parents. I'm going to tell them, even though he didn't have a clue who they were. Well, Mrs. Sampson came out, texting away, texting every house. And presently all the adults came out and stood under the sputtering street light that couldn't quite tell if it was day or night. And in their gray, cold gloaming, they picked up the puppy dog heads. Well, they were light as air. They were almost as transparent as the shed skin of snakes. What it was, each one was just a single layer of chicken wire and a single layer of white tissue paper with these ridiculous faces painted on them. What does this mean? What's wrong with those kids? Are they trying to scare us to death? What's wrong with those children? And then somebody said, look. And there between the houses, rising up on the hills of corn that was blazing, bright, brassy, the very last rays of sunlight, were the dogs running. Somebody let their dogs loose. Mr. Sampson had no problem saying, there's a law against that. Get your dogs in. And the indignation rose. Who would let their dogs out like that? But then they watched. And the dogs ran up to the ridgeline and looked back down at the adults. And that's when the adults realized they weren't dogs at all. They were wolves. Well, now it's one thing to live out in Country View and see fluffy little deer and little quail crossing the road. It's quite another thing to see wolves. Why, they hadn't signed on for wolves. And the wolves stood on the ridgeline looking down at the adults in the gloaming, their eyes glittering like topaz in the very last shards of sunset. And then they were gone, yipping and howling with joy, galloping into the darkness, and who knows what, gone forever, leaving the adults with their puppy dog heads in the darkness. And each and every one of them in that dark slip of the year between Halloween and All Souls Day, when magic seems to seep out from the netherworld to haunt the living, it left all of them uncomfortable and anxious and unmoored. What if those teenagers were bewitched? Is it possible teenagers could be bewitched to turn into wild animals? Oh my goodness. And then another unbidden thought came to them. Well, if teenagers could be bewitched and turned into wild animals, maybe all of them, the adults, were living under a spell as well. A spell cast by their cozy, comfy homes. A spell that had told them somehow that the beauty and violence and power of the seasons and the push of nature, the forever changing face of nature, was a spectator event, you see, and all of that power and ferocity would somehow leave themselves personally, you see, untouched and unchanged on the other side of the glass. And the gray chill of a winter evening crept up under their thin jackets and through their sweaters and caused them all to shiver. But what was more unsettling was inside there was a rattling and a shaking, just like autumn leaves on the very edge of branches, fighting a losing battle against the wind.
Thank you, Vicky. I love how your story had all these like very vivid, real details and then the spell of magic. So you put us under your spell. Thank you. All right. Now we turn to Ed Lewis. Here from Are you in Sacramento, Ed?
I am, but I'm leaving at 5 in the morning for Phoenix.
Oh my goodness. Ed is quite the world traveler or what, but he also holds down the Sacramento Storytelling Guild swap and all kinds of stuff for the SAC board. Tell us a story, Ed.
All right. I was in love with Michelle and ready to propose, even though traditions dating back to around 250 BC forbid marrying outside of her gypsy clan. She assured me that they would see our sincere love and I might be accepted. The emphasis was on might. She also wanted to dispel any notions I had about gypsy stereotypes of them being con artists and criminals, thieves. So we planned a trip out to Florida to visit her brother, Harry. Harry lived on 5 acres outside of Sarasota, Florida, which is the northwest corner of Florida. And we went out this secluded road deep into the forest. And we stopped at this mobile home and a log house. And I was greeted by this massive 6'5" giant with a tight t-shirt, muscles bulging out, and tigers on his shirt looking out at me. Firstly, he gave Michelle a big bear hug, kissed her, said, "Oh, I love you, sis." And then he looked over at me and he said, "Let me check you out, man." And he looked me up and down and said, "Well, you're a little flabby, but you know, I like how you look me right in the eye." And that's important because you never know when you might have to fight or flee. Okay, I said, "Well, said, I'll tell you what, follow me." And he takes this leather armband and he wraps it around my arm, gives me a smelly bucket, and we head out into the forest. We walked about 5 minutes down this secluded trail. And as we're nearing what is a clearing, I could see it was a clearing coming up. I heard these growls. And I was thinking of lions or bears, maybe. And we got into this clearing, and there were 4 steel cages, and each one had a Bengal tiger in it. He walked up to him and he said, "Hey, Barry, what's going on?" And he opened the cage. He took he took from the bucket I had, he opened the lid, and there was meat in there, raw meat. He took that in and he sat down, and Barry sat in his lap, and like he was petting a cat, he was talking to him, and he fed him his meal. Well, he did that with the next 2. And the third one, he said, "No, it's your turn." My turn? What do you mean, my turn? He said, "What's the matter? A cat got your tongue?" And he opened the cage door and he said, "Go feed Michelle. You know, like my sister, you know, the woman you love. She's very loving. Just don't look her straight in the eye because she might figure you might want to attack." I looked down and I didn't go all the way in. I just went part way in and I threw the meat over to Michelle and she took it and tore it up. And I quickly got out and closed that door. And then he looked at me, he said, "All right, you passed the first test." And he gave me this big bear hug and I felt like all my bones were going to crush. Well, we got back and then I got to meet the other gypsies. It was the Roma Gypsy Band, and they were out in this property, and they were all Ringling Brothers, Barnum Bailey circus performers. Harry, the big giant, was the head tiger trainer for the Ringling Brothers. Her brother, Michael, was the head elephant trainer who eventually started his own circus in Chicago that was funded by the mafia. So I was coming into a very interesting family. Well, my notions of the Gypsy clan were quickly dispelled. I mean, they were fascinating people. I mean, the clan was about 40 people on this about 50 acres of land, and they had built all these interesting structures. They were intelligent. There were performers. They were very articulate. Some were clowns, some were acrobats, and the younger kids there was a group of about 20 of them from 18 down to 14 that were heading to Austria to follow a circus. And they saw the writing on the wall that animals were not going to be used much in the circus in the future. So they were daredevils, like motorcycle riders who would go around these big rings, and acrobats and trapeze artists. Well, we had a great time. And then I went to visit her mother. Now, I learned a lot about her mother because Michelle had told me that her mother had been a gypsy in Germany when Hitler came into power, and the Gypsy clan were thrown into death camps. And she was there for 4 years until she escaped. Some of them escaped, and she made her way eventually to Florida. And since they were circus people, she was a trapeze artist. They got in with Barnum and Bailey Circus. She had 2 boys, and then she was pregnant with Michelle. This is 1960. But Michelle never met her father because while mom was pregnant, they had just performed in Lake Tahoe, and they were coming to Sacramento down Highway 50 grade in 1960. And the lead truck with her father, who was the head ringmaster, and a driver and a couple people went over the cliff down 300 feet and was killed. Now, the circus family took care of their own. So they took the whole family, they set them up in Hollywood and set up a trapeze in the back. Michelle never got into the circus part, but the circus would come by every couple months, and they would pick up Michelle's mother, and she'd be gone for 2, 3, 4, 5 months. And her brother Harry took care of her. So they had a very deep bond. But her mother was now had dementia and was in a dementia facility. So we went to visit her, and when we came in, she didn't recognize Michelle until Michelle said, "It's your little Mikula, your little Mikula." And she, "Oh, my little Mikula, my little Mikula." And she took Michelle in her hands and combed her hair, brushed it back, and just whispered things in German and in English. And then started singing in German. And that's how her and I communicated. I just grabbed a mug and started singing with her. And that was my connection with her. We had a great time there until the orderlies came in to change her diapers. And when they grabbed her, she just started screaming in German and translated, and also in English. And the English words were, "Don't take me to the gas chamber. No, don't take me." She's screaming this. It was really horrifying. Well, we came back to the States, and like I said, the family had a career with the circus. Michelle and I got married in 2001, and I became part of the Gypsy clan. And a couple years later, her brother Harry and her mother passed away. Her brother Michael is still alive, and he's now on Ringling Brothers property outside of Sarasota, where they have bought this huge area, and circus retired people and people working the circus can live there. And that's where her brother's living to this day. So I learned a lot about gypsies. I learned to appreciate their unique culture and all they've been through and all the persecution and discrimination they've had throughout their history. but how they really have a very clear, deep family bonds with each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Wow, that's a window into a world that most of us only see from the outside. Thank you so much.
You're
All
welcome.
right, it's time for me to turn the evening over to Sally. Sally Holtzman, our fearless leader.
All right. Yeah. Well, I want to wish everyone a joyous new year, a healthy new year, and many, many times together to share our story swap. Let me take you out with this little story about Christmas that if you've been with us for 25 years, you've heard it 25 times. You've heard it 25 times because I usually tell it every Christmas, and thank you for letting me do that. Let me go. There we go. So let me tell you about, hold on, y'all. I have to get the right view here. Gallery. Well, whatever it is. No. All right, here we go. So Main Street was getting ready for Christmas. The streetlights had red bows, big silver bells. And Mr. Jackson, he was the artist who painted the store windows, had been working for days and days, making our town into a beautiful winter scene. On the hardware store windows, there were mice, there were little mice and things painting and making signs of Christmas. They were hammering, they were sawing, they were using screwdrivers. And Santa Claus and his sleigh came flying over the windows of the Gastonia Gazette, the sleigh full of oranges and apples and all that kind of stuff. And you know what? The reason I didn't tell this story or any other story is that I'm getting old and my mind is leaving me a little bit. So I'm so sorry. But the street I was living on was also preparing for Christmas. The fathers had put lights around the windows, lights around the roof, and we all had bay windows. And in these bay windows were beautiful Christmas trees. So at night when you drove down the street, New Hope Road, you'd look and each window was alight with these trees. And at our house, we had nothing, not a wreath, not a light, not a tree, nothing. All there was me, this little 6-year-old whiny child going after her mother. But why can't we have a wreath? Why can't we just have a wreath on our door? Why can't we just have a few lights in the window? What we had in our bay window was a Louis XIV table, a lamp, and a gold shade. Why can't we have something? Because, Sally, we're not doing Christmas. But Mother, how is Santa Claus going to know that I'm here if we don't have any decorations? I'll have your father write him a letter. You see, my mother didn't understand how important it was for me to have Christmas because, you see, I had gone to Belk's department store with my mother. We had come down on the escalator, and there on the counter, there she was, a doll about this high, blonde hair, the Shirley Temple bridal doll. And she had a white satin gown on with little pearls and a full veil that fell onto the counter. I wanted that doll. And when I went down and picked up the veil and looked at her, she had this little sweet mouth and eyes that opened and closed. Oh, Santa, bring me the Shirley Temple bridal doll, please. So to make sure that Santa Claus knew that I was alive, I participated as much as I could in Christmas holidays, activities. At school, I sang with gusto. Hark the herald angels sing. Sally, please modulate your voice. I wanted to be Mary in the Christmas play because I had dark hair like Mary, had a nose like Mary, and my teacher chose Beth, who was blonde, and I had to be a shepherd and wear my daddy's bathrobe. But finally, it was Christmas Eve, and my mother made her wonderful Christmas Eve chocolate cake, 3 layers with cream frosting in between each layer. Oh, it was wonderful, and she sat it on the table. And then she said to me, Sally, get a china dish from the dining room, a sterling silver fork, and a crystal gobble, crystal glass. And we'll make Santa Claus his share. And she cut a big piece of cake for Santa and put it on the china plate and put milk in the crystal goblet. And we put that on the table, the Louis XIV table in the bay window. We turned on the light, so Santa Claus would see that we had prepared this special dessert for him and come to my house. Well, I went to bed early that night. My mother kissed me goodnight and assured me that Santa Claus would come. But to make sure, I sang Christmas carols. I opened the window a little ways and I sang Christmas carols. And then I recited a verse from the Bible that I had learned in school, and there were shepherds abiding in the field. And I finally fell asleep. And then we had roosters next door, but I awoke before the roosters did, and I went downstairs because my daddy, I knew, would be in his office, and there was a little light coming out of it. And I said, Daddy, did Santa Claus come? Did Santa Claus come? Can we go to the living room? Can we go look? Sally, we need to wait for your mother. Oh, please, Daddy, let's just go look. And so we went and stood in the living room doorway, and we looked on the hearth. And there she was, the Shirley Temple bridal doll with her veil falling onto the hearth. Oh, Daddy, look, and look what's next to her. It was a steam trunk. And I ran and I opened up the trunk a little ways, and there were clothes hanging on this side. And I opened one of the drawers and peeked in. There was underwear in that drawer. And then my mother came and she said, I thought you were going to wait for me. Oh, Mama, look, Santa Claus came. Look what he brought me. The Shirley Temple bridal doll. And we all sat down in front of the hearth, my father in his blue silk bathrobe, my mother in her pajamas, me in my pajamas. And we went and tried on all the clothes for the doll and everything. And it was a wonderful, wonderful Christmas. And that night, when it was dark, I put the Shirley Temple bridal doll on the table with the white vase, with the white lamp and the gold shed. And I put the Shirley Temple doll on that table and turned on the light, and her gown just was luminous. And I knew that Santa Claus had been there, and so did all the neighbors. Thank you so much for listening to me. I'm so sorry.
Sally, we loved it. We loved it. Now, Sally, do you have something to show us?
Oh, yes, I do, come to think of it. Here she comes. Here she is, the Shirley Temple bridal doll. I don't have the veil anymore, but this doll is 83 years old, so she is. Happy New Year, all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you to all of our storytellers, and a special thank you. I'm sorry I didn't introduce her at the beginning, but I think most of you know her. But Marnie Berenson, where are you, Marnie?
Yes.
Reveal yourself, our tech host, without whom we could not do all this, and we look forward to seeing you in 2024.
Oh my God.
And we'll
Yeah.
end our recording, but then if anybody wants to stay on for